This is the second video on what theory is not. In an earlier video, I introduced two definitions of theory. Most of the time, different definitions of theory have been quite confusing to many educational leadership researchers and practitioners. Further complicating the matter is that a theory can also mean an overall perspective from which one sees and interprets the world, such as postmodern theory, poststructuralist theory, feminist theory, queer theory, and critical theory. Even though those terms include the word theory, they are more about philosophical viewpoints on how to see and interpret the world, but less about specific constructs and relationships among them. Much of the discussion on theory in educational leadership was more about philosophical positions, such as positivism, structuralism, subjectivism, naturalism, and postmodernism. In my earlier video on what is theory, I introduced that a theory explains essential elements of what, for example, constructs, how, for example, how are the constructs related, and why, the assumptions that underlie empirical patterns that were observed or are expected to be observed. If you say the theoretical framework of your study is constructivism, then how do different theoretical constructs guide you to formulate a research question? Constructivism tells you that people construct their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiencing things and reflecting on those experiences. But constructivism doesn't tell you what specific factors to look at. It fails to tell you what, how, and why. It gives you an elusive hint that some factors are responsible for a phenomenon of your interest. Leadership is socially constructed. So do collective efficacy and organizational culture. In fact, almost all constructs in social sciences can be considered as socially constructed. There has to be something more specific than constructivism to explain a reason for the way things are. In genetics, phenotype refers to observable traits, such as height, eye color, and personality traits. In humans, phenotype is a result of interaction between genetic makeup and environment. Genetic makeup is also known as genotype, half of which comes from a biological mother, and the rest half from a biological father. Environmental factors include nutrition, parenting, and relationships with siblings, or lack thereof. This is why the youngest child is more likely to have a mentality of risk-breaking and rule-breaking than their elder siblings do. The later borns tend to face lax rules because their parents are exhausted both physically and emotionally. The later borns can get away with things that their elder siblings couldn't have. This environmental factor contributes to the later born's rule-breaking mentality, which has been considered a trait for good leaders who change organizational culture. Some leaders tend to make decisions by the book. Organizational rules that are set by their predecessors must be followed to the bitter end without bending those rules. They keep the rule book and defer to rank. But other leaders believe that organizational change is not made without breaking rules, just like omelet is not made without breaking eggs. The instruction of stay in your lane, follow the chain of command, and not to go off the rails may not register on their mind. In fact, the trait of rule breaking, which is a phenotype, is determined not only by genotype but also by social factors. Constructivism works in a generic way, but it doesn't point you to examine what specific genotype, phenotype, and environmental factors to investigate in your research on leaders' traits. Your research can be grounded in constructivism, but constructivism in itself is not sufficient to serve as a theoretical framework. To formulate your theoretical framework, you need to find or develop theories or constructs that are specific enough to explain what, how, and why. To be clear, I'm not antagonistic to philosophy. I believe that as a real seeker after truth, a scientist's ultimate contribution to science and society is to create philosophical insight, a fundamental understanding of knowledge, reality, and existence. In an opinion paper titled Why Science Needs Philosophy, authors argue that philosophy and science share the tools of logic, conceptual analysis, and rigorous argumentation. Yet, philosophers can operate these tools with degrees of thoroughness, freedom, and theoretical abstraction that practicing researchers often cannot afford in their daily activities. To conduct empirical research, you need theories to translate philosophical abstraction into something concrete. In this video, I discuss that theory explains essential elements of what, how, and why. It is not philosophy, which offers an overall perspective from which one sees and interprets the world. To conduct empirical research, you need theories to translate philosophical abstraction into something concrete. The next video will be the last video about what theory is not.